Thank you. Please be seated. I hope that we can finish at about 5:40 for tea, an early tea, so we can join our guests and not have them wait too long. Item number 1 is apologies for absence. Thank you very much. Now move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Can I see anyone who wishes to declare? If not, please do so at the point that you realise later in the meeting, perhaps. Item 3 is minutes of the previous council meetings. Can I approve those? Thank you. We now move on to item 4, appointment to committees. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The head of law and governance has been notified of change of membership requested by the Labour Whip leaders to fill committee vacancies raised by Councillor Penwood resigning the Labour Whip and sitting as an independent councillor, and as a consequence his place is on the growth board of the Scrutiny Committee and as representative on Florence Park Community Centre. So I'm reading this all out because I'm conscious that not everyone may have a copy of the briefing note. So Council is asked to make the following appointments to committees: East Area Planning Committee, Councillor Christine Sim; Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Steve Curran. Council is asked to approve the following appointment: Growth Board Scrutiny Panel, Councillor John Tanner. And Council is invited to note the following appointment to the Council representative on an outside body: Florence Park Community Centre, Councillor Ludgard. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to item 5, which is announcements. For myself, I'd like to say, as is traditional, there will be drinks and mince pies at the end of this meeting. The quicker we get through this meeting, the sooner we get to the drinks and mince pies. Sheriff, any announcements from you, Craig?
Just briefly, Lord Mayor, we welcomed both of us 60 new freemen and women into the city on that ceremony, and it's always entertaining to hear them plead allegiance to your good self, and I believe also to agree not to buy any goods of foreign origin, I think is the other thing to say. But it was, as always, a good-natured and fun ceremony. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now move on to announcements from the leader. Do you have any? No. Thank you. Chief Exec? No. Monitoring Officer? No. And Chief Finance Officer? No. Thank you. We note that on item 6 there are no public addresses or questions on items of business before us this evening. So we then move on to item 7, Oxford North. Agenda, it's page 33 in the main agenda. Councillor Brown.
I move.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Smith. And any questions or comments on this? If not, we will move straight. Craig.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's a question, really. I mean, it is quite unusual for us to commit still money that we don't yet have. So, and I know we did it with Westgate, but that was, I think, to a clearer brief of what was actually the money was going to be spent on. So the question is, are we clear on what sort of transport and infrastructure projects the money will be spent on? And if not, is it wise for us to commit at this stage without that information? Because, as you know, still money can be used for lots of other social goods like schools and hospitals and health and social care facilities and play areas, etc. So I'm wondering whether we should be committing at this early stage without that detail. And the second question is about Section 106 funds. Does it impact on that at all, or are those still totally separate? And I believe they are, but it's just worth clarifying.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So in answer to the first question, I think these are unusual circumstances, I would agree, and I think it is not an entirely ideal situation, and I think we made that quite clear when we were discussing its report in the City Executive Board. I think it's important in terms of trying to make sure that we maximise the possibility of this development going ahead, to make sure that we are quite clear at the beginning what we would be prepared to put forward in terms of SIL. And in answer to your second question, no, I believe that Section 106 funding would still be separate. I don't know if anyone here is able to advise me further on that one. But yeah, sorry, Adrian, it is you, I couldn't take my eyes. Yeah, Adrian's confirming it, so I'm glad that I'm giving you correct information on that.
Okay, unless there are any further questions or comments, we will move to a vote on that. Can I see all those in favour, please show. And those against? And abstentions? 2. Carried. We then move on to item 8, which is on page 41 of the main agenda. Councillor Clarkson.
Yes, I would move both these reports, which have been approved by the General Purposes Licensing Committee.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Susan Brown. Can we have any questions on this? Great.
Just a very quick one. Obviously, this is perfectly reasonable. I'm just wondering why the odd numbers, £297 and £128, and not rounding them up.
Councillor Clarkson.
I'm sorry, I can find out for you. Obviously, they've been following IKEA's policy of bizarre pricing, but I can try and get a clearer answer of it.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on these performing chickens? No? Okay. In that case, can I see all those in favour? Please show. Those against? And abstentions? Okay. Thank you. That's agreed and con. We then move on to item 9, the Constitution Review, which is on page 51 of your agenda. I understand Councillor Brown is deferring to Councillor Nigel Chapman on this. Nigel.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. You have in front of you the outcome of the recent annual review of the Constitution. You have a number of documents, including an appendix which lists all the substantive changes, and also in appendix 2 a separate supplement which is the full revised Constitution with those changes highlighted. In addition, there are 2 further recommendations in front of us. A delegation to the monitoring officer to ensure that the changes we agreed today are reflected consistently throughout the Constitution. This is simply to avoid a further report back in the future if we need to make some minor changes. And secondly, a second delegation to the monitoring officer to amend the Constitution at a later date to the social media policy. This follows a recommendation from a recent Code of Conduct investigation. The Council adopts the social media policy to provide additional guidance to councillors, and once drafted, the new policy will go to the Standards Committee for consideration and approval before it is added to the Constitution. I would like to say thank you to officers. This has been a labour of love. Not everybody enjoys constitutional matters. They can be dry, they can be long, but they are very, very important. And I'd like to pay a tribute to those in law and government for all their hard work on this. And secondly, to a cross-party group of councillors, which I have the pleasure of chairing, meeting the Lord Mayor's parlour, fortified by good victuals from the Lord Mayor, which made the deliberations go a little smoother. As a result, we have in front of us, I believe, a consensus about the way in which these matters could go forward and be decided by elected officers tonight. So without further ado, I'm happy to answer questions and highlight particular changes, but I'm sure you've all read the documents. I'm sure you all have enjoyed them, unlike the Brexit document. Some of you say you've read it when you haven't, but I hope, unlike the Brexit document, there is cross-party support in this chamber for it. So on that basis, I listen to questions and comments from the floor. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we need a seconder for that. Councillor Brown, thank you very much. I understand that there is an amendment proposed, and that is as per the sheets on our table. I think what I'll do is ask Councillor Simmons to speak to his amendment, and then we'll ask Nigel if he wishes to accept that before we take the vote.
Yes, I'll be very brief, Lord Mayor. I was consulted.
Sorry, Craig, do you have a seconder?
Well, I have a seconder.
We wait while the tumbleweed blows across the... Thank you.
Not quite
Councillor
the rustling.
Councillor, thank you.
Chamber. Yeah, so apologies. It's just because I've been consulted, and it's and indeed I agree with what Nigel said, that most of them are reasonable changes and not particularly exciting changes, most of them. But I just decided to, when we were looking at the limit on motions, the word limit, which is 300 words, I decided just to run my word processor word count over the motions on the council papers today, and found indeed two of them, one Labour and one Lib Dem motion, do exceed substantially the 300 word limit. I should say my motions are brief and to the point and well within the 300 word limit. But I just thought I would put it to council that I do have to think that the two motions that do exceed the word count are good motions, are important motions about homelessness from the Labour group and about the expressway from the Lib Dem group. And I wouldn't like to see that sort of depth of discussion and debate diminished by a sort of largely arbitrary word count. And I should also say that my motion, which is the shortest one on there on Farnham Court, did actually spark a load of inquiries from the lawyer because they felt that there were some points that needed expanding further. So I do think there's a happy medium between 300 and 500. I just thought 500 would have allowed all the motions on the table today to actually be tabled.
Okay. Would the seconder like to speak on that, or are we agreeing that on? Okay. John,
as the paragon of public virtue, I am happy to concede to Councillor Simmons' proposal.
Okay. Councillor Tanner.
I'd like to speak in support of the original 300 words because brevity is the soul of wit.
Yeah. When will you learn that, John?
Okay. Any further comments on this? Councillor Ron Smith.
About 400.
Actually, Lord Mayor, I actually wanted to speak to another part of the Constitution, not this particular motion that's for the Council. Shall I wait till this has been taken?
Can we get this over with first?
Thank you, then I'll speak. Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm sorry to disagree with you, John, but as Bob Price said in our ceremonial part of our meeting, the councillor's disease is possibly prolixity, and separating us councillors from our prolixity might have bad consequences. So I fully support Craig's amendment.
I thought it said solipsism first.
Okay, any further comments on this specific part of the amendment which has now been accepted? In which case we'll now move back to Councillor Ross Smith.
Right, thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I actually wanted to speak on the changes that are going to happen to public speaking and the limit on it. I was that part of the working party, and I have some concerns over it. I think it's always right that we should welcome speakers and questions and transparency within the council chamber. However, what I would like to see, in fact, is perhaps just keeping an eye on it. If it does encourage more speakers to come forward and more questions to council, that's got to be for a good thing. I still regret the demise of the area committees, where residents could come to a local meeting and address councillors there and question them on local issues and raise concerns locally. So that is a missed chance for residents to speak to their local councillors rather than having to make a trek either into the city centre. So yes, I'll go along with the changes to the Constitution as they're laid out in the amendment and things, but I do think we need to keep an eye on it, and I hope that the chair of the working group will agree with me on that. Thank you.
Any further comments? In which case I'll ask Nigel to sum up.
Well, I know the comments. I mean, there was a cross-party consensus about the need to enable more and a varied group of people to come and address this chamber and to try and do it in a more succinct way, so we have that opportunity. Let's see how it goes. I think that's the spirit of this document. It still allows quite extensive time, frankly, for an individual to both address and ask questions, 8 minutes in all out of a limit of 45, so that's quite a big proportion. So I think it's a fair balance, and let's see how it goes. I'll ask for your support. Thank you.
Okay, can I see all those in favour of the proposed changes? Please show with the amendment. And those against? I'm not seeing anyone. And I think no abstentions either. Okay, thank you very much for that. We now move on to item 10 on page 69 of the main agenda, the Council and Committee Meetings Programme for May. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I move the report, and in so doing, I just want to draw Council's attention to the fact that this does make the default start time of all committee meetings next year 6 p.m. Obviously with the exception of Council, which remains at 5 p.m. And just to remind people again that those meeting times can be changed at the determination of each committee at the start of the meetings of for that year, at the convenience of the individual committee members. So there is still obviously the opportunity, if people feel that that is not the right time, for them to then change the start time of those meetings. But yes, been asked to draw that to people's attention.
Okay. Can I see a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any questions on those proposals or comments? In which case we'll move straight to the vote on that. Can I see all those in favour? Please show. I think that's unanimous. Okay, we now move on to item 11. Questions to City Executive Board on the board minutes, pages 77 and 81. We'll take the 16th of October first. Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. This is just a comment really about item 83, which is on page 79 and 80 of the main agenda. This was an item about a proposed construction contract award. I attended the CEB meeting asking to speak about this. It was deferred. It says in these minutes that it was deferred until November, and I know I've got a written question about this which has had a very concise answer, but I did just want to mention that the minutes say it was deferred until November, and it then didn't appear in November. What I wanted to say at that board meeting, and hope I'll get the opportunity to again, is that this idea of off-site construction I think is a very interesting one, and I'm delighted that the council is pursuing it, and to note that it was also, according to the notes that I saw, mentioned by the housing subgroup of the growth board. I think it's an extremely interesting idea, and I hope that in due course we will be able to incorporate the benefits of that. But it would be nice, if the minutes do say that it's deferred until November, it would be nice if it did then appear in November, or an explanation was put in as to why it didn't. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brown. Oh, all right then, Mike.
Thank you. Yes, the reason is explained in my written response later in the agenda, and I apologise that was not added as a correction to the CEB minutes. More broadly, as Councillor Gant says, the housing subgroup of the Local Growth Board has been considering the idea of off-site build and modular housing and the extent to which it might be possible to gain a common approach to this among the 5 district councils with a common approved list of contractors and perhaps the potential of some efficiencies by procuring in bulk. That's something very much in its infancy at the moment, but I do agree that it has potential.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on the board minutes or comments? In which case, I don't believe we need to vote on those. We move on to the next item, item 12. These are questions on notice from members of council. I think we can hopefully get through a few of these before tea. We move on to the first one, which is from Councillor Gant to Councillor Clarkson. I believe these have all been answered. So if there's a supplementary, please let me know.
No supplementary. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons to Councillor Clarkson on the covered market.
No supplementary, nor the next one.
We move on to number 4, Councillor Gant to Councillor Clarkson on accessibility audit.
Thank you for the answer. No supplementary.
Thank you. From Councillor Harris to Councillor Clarkson, Wroclaw and Padva, twinning. Any supplementaries?
Any estimated date for Padua becoming a fully twin city?
I don't think we have got a date yet, but I will update you once I do know. Thank you.
Question number 6, Councillor Harris to Councillor Clarkson on Ramallah, twinning.
No supplementary.
Thank you. Question 7, Councillor Goddard to Councillor Chapman on trees.
Yes, thanks for the answer. No supplementary.
Question 8, Councillor Garden to Councillor Chapman on EU citizens.
Thank you for the answers. I'd just like to know, you say that the cost that you are supporting or reimbursing staff, but you've only helped 8 so far. Are you reminding staff that they are entitled to this, or is there continuous reminders that they have access to this?
Yes, I'm sure we are, and I will make sure we do.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simmons to Councillor Turner. Do you have a supplementary?
Well, I was going to thank him, but no supplementary.
No,
Let him
that's
know,
fine.
yeah,
Thank you. Question 10, Councillor Humgay to Councillor Turner, fraud investigation. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, Mayor.
Thank you. Question 11 from Councillor Garden to Councillor Turner, shared prosperity fund. Thank you. Question 12, Councillor Goddard to Councillor Upton, 5 Mile Drive Pavilion.
Thanks for the answer.
Thank you. Question 13, Councillor Gant to Councillor Rowley.
No supplementary. We've dealt with that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gant to Councillor Rowley, Elsfield Hall Plan.
Yes, thank you for the answer. It's a little bit disappointing. This is an important site that was given planning permission to provide much needed housing some years ago, and it is regrettable that it hasn't been built out. Delighted to see that there are plans for it coming forward. But I mean, would the councillor agree with me that the council could and should have moved faster?
I agree that it's regrettable it wasn't it hasn't been built out already. Unfortunately, I don't agree that it's that the council could have moved faster. Between the original planning commission and the current plans, the government's policy changed majorly 3 times on housing funding, and the change that stopped us being able to build the site out as quickly as possible was the government's decision, which has now been reversed, to introduce the high-value council housing levy. We had to set aside from the housing revenue account a sum of more than £40 million to prevent loss of genuinely affordable homes for Oxford people, and that meant that the housing revenue account building projects, of which this was one, were unfortunately inevitably delayed. We are now back on track, thanks to the hard work of officers both in setting up a housing company and also the hard work of some of my colleagues in this council, and also the leaderships of other councils in lobbying the government to say that this country would never get any affordable housing built if they continued with their policies. And there have been some, not all of their policies have been reversed, but there have been some welcome revisions which should assist.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Simmons to Councillor Hollingsworth, Oxford North, new jobs.
No supplementary for 15 to 18.
Thank you very much. We now move on to question 19 from Councillor Simmons to Councillor Hayes.
Yes, a supplementary, please. I'm just wondering what the process is for councillors to get engaged. Obviously, it's quite a key cornerstone policy for the City Council.
Thanks, Craig. I'm happy to say that there'll be lots of opportunities to engage in the new year. We're already in the process of arranging an all-member briefing, not just for the city, but for the county too.
Question 20, Councillor Gant to Councillor Hayes, zero emission zone costs.
No supplementary,
Thank you. Councillor Harris to Councillor Hayes, pollution monitoring.
The answer focuses on the equipment. Does that mean that it is the council's view that there's no need for any monitoring of particulates at any additional locations?
Thanks, Councillor. We focused on the equipment just to make sure that you have the reassurance that we think it's adequate and suitable. In terms of further monitoring, I hope that you know from the conversations that you had with Joe that we don't get government support for this. We don't get the depth of support we need for extra monitoring. I agree with you. I would like to see more monitoring happening, but until we get that support from government, it's going to be hard. We do keep on lobbying government on this issue, and we have done in a whole range of air pollution issues.
Councillor Harris to Councillor Smith, severe weather emergency protocol.
No supplementary.
Lovely. Question 23, Councillor Simmons to Councillor Brown, cost of living wage.
No supplementary, thank you.
Councillor Garden to Councillor Brown on the Sustainable Communities Act.
Thank you for making the letters public also to the MPs. Can I ask that if we do get a response, that those can be made public as well, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Gant to Councillor Brown, Growth Board local plan processes.
Yes, thank you for the answer. These are obviously complex issues that are being much chewed over in other places, but I think this is partly as a result of the concerns about the sort of flow of accountability back to the constituent councils. The answer says that the options that have been presented to Vale of White Horse in terms of the reallocation of housing at Dalton Barracks would not be particularly significant in terms of timescales. The numbers are quite significantly different from the original ones. Would the leader agree that they could in fact have the potential for being quite significantly different in terms of timescales, and that might affect the whole JSSP process?
To be honest, I think I'd have to get your written answer to that. I don't feel sufficiently au fait with the details that you're raising there.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons, Councillor Brown on the
No supplementary, thank you for the answer.
Lord Mayor, I beg your pardon, I think I've missed one. 26.
My apologies. 26. Councillor Gant to Councillor Brown, Growth Board staff recruitment.
Thank you. Just to say thank you very much for the answer. This is staffing which has been undertaken by partner councils, I wouldn't wish to put the leader on the spot by saying would she agree with me that they could have acted a little bit quicker. So I'll just say would she join me in thanking the officers of this council who have shouldered a considerable amount of extra work in helping the Growth Board and its various bodies come into existence.
I would certainly agree with you on that, Councillor Baird.
Thank you. We now move on to Councillor Simmons, Councillor Brown, Freedom of the City.
Yeah, sorry, no supplementary.
Thank you. Councillor Garden to Councillor Brown, People's Vote. Councillor Simmons to Councillor Brown on People's Vote.
No supplementary.
And Councillor Simmons to Councillor Brown on Oxford Union and Steve Bannon.
Yes, just a brief supplementary. Thank you, Susan, for your joining me in condemning the Steve Bannon's appearance at the Oxford Union. I just wonder if you also write to the Oxford Union expressing the views laid out in this gig.
Right. We will not take the agenda item 13 public addresses until after Council T. We will therefore move on to item 14, page 115 of the main agenda, outside reports, Oxford Strategic Partnership. These are for questions and to note. Councillor Brown, do you want to say anything by way of introduction? No, okay. Any questions on the Oxford Strategic Partnership work? Craig?
Yes, thank you. I have two questions. Firstly, I sort of welcome the mention of a new online donations platform, which I know the Finance Panel have discussed as well. Just wondering what the progress is on that and when we can expect some news. And the second question is that, you know, obviously the low carbon city is a major theme for the OSP, and I was just looking at the website as I was following the links through from the OSP site, and it is rather thin actually on content. They've got only one event advertised in 2018, one event in 2019. The case study is 5 years old, the latest case study, and the news items that they're more than a year old. So I'm just wondering what efforts can be made to bring that. I know there's lots happening, but the website just really doesn't reflect that. It doesn't reflect well on the priority given to that theme.
So on the second part first, we'll certainly look at that and see what we can do to get that updated, and thanks for drawing that to our attention. On the first part, I haven't got any updates immediately to give you on the giving platform, although it is something that I have personally been chasing very urgently, because frankly at this point in particular we haven't just been in a position to launch it before now. As soon as I do, believe you me, we'll be making sure that everybody in this council and beyond is aware, because I would like to see it in place as soon as possible. I think it's a really important part of our efforts to tackle homelessness in the city, both through raising money, but also making people aware of the alternatives to giving.
Thank you. Any further questions on the Oxford Strategic Partnership? If there isn't, can we, Council, note that report? Then move on to Oxfordshire Health Improvement Board. Councillor Upton, is there anything you wish to say by way of introduction?
Yes, I was just going to say that, well, just for background, the Health Improvement Board is a statutory body that sits under the Oxfordshire Health and Wellbeing Board, and its job is to deliver 4 priorities that are set out in the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy, which you can read. So the Health Improvement Board covers a huge variety of areas that all feed into the mental and physical good health of the residents of our city. You will see as you look through there is a heavy emphasis on 2 things in particular within these priorities. One is prevention. So this is in line with the old adage of prevention is better than a cure. We want people to live not just longer lives, but enjoy good health in those extra years. So we want to keep people active, we want to keep them enjoying life, stop them getting ill. And the Health Improvement Board scrutinises a whole raft of initiatives with that aim, so do please read them. The second big focus is tackling inequality by levelling up health indicators. And I think this is particularly reflects the influence that the City Council has brought to bear on the Health Improvement Board, because we here are particularly aware of the terrible inequalities across the city and that we are striving to improve those. So I could give you a very brief flavour of the many things that are in there. You could get reports from the Fuel Poverty Workshop, from the Domestic Abuse Strategy Group, the work at the Barton Health in Newtown has been praised. We agreed to sign up to the Mental Wellbeing Prevention Concordat. Active Oxfordshire, which has been relaunched and now has a strong focus on getting the least active members of our communities to get some exercise, rather than getting already sporty people to be even more sporty. And I think this is particularly important for supporting our health inequalities priorities. Loneliness prevention has been looked at. Air quality management has appeared for the first time on the agenda. So, as you will appreciate, the levers the city has are limited, but by working with the county and the district, we are able to influence determinants of the health of not just the residents of our city, but also those in the rest of the county who are unlucky enough to be living under the weight of a Conservative district council. So just before I commend this report to you, I'd like to thank the officers for all their work on this, particularly Danny Granito, who's the Policy and Partnerships Team Manager here at Oxford, but she's a District Liaison Officer on the Health Improvement Board, and her wealth of knowledge on all of these areas has made it possible for us to get up to speed. That's it, I commend the report to you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? I see Councillor Ross Smith and Councillor Craig Simmons.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that. I always find these reports very, very interesting. I'm very pleased to hear what you're saying about joint working and partnerships. I think that is a good way of improving the health of all the lives of people in Oxfordshire. One thing that has come into my attention actually last week was that the Oxford Breastfeeding Advisory Group has now become a charity as of April this year. But of course they've lost their funding that happened through the Conservative and Independent Alliance at County. It's the CIA at County, Louise, not just Conservatives running the county level. May it should be short-lived, she says, as an aside. But I am obviously wanting to champion the Oxfordshire breastfeeding service as such. It was in our children's centres, which we all know have gone, which is a great shame. But they still carry on in certain areas. As I said, they become a charity, and I wondered if you could use your influence, in fact, actually, to see about further funding from them, because they have lost their last bit of funding now completely, which I think is a real dreadful thing. We all know, I hope we do anyway, that breast is best, actually, for babies, and the more mothers we can get to encourage them to do that and continue breastfeeding. For one thing, it can save them up to 50 quid a week. So if we're looking at poverty as such, particularly in areas where mums are not breastfeeding, persuade them to continue, perhaps with the second child he will start for the first time, it can save the family money that can be spent on other things that they need desperately. So please, I hope you champion that. I certainly will be. Perhaps the two of us can work on that together.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you very much indeed for that. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I checked with Ian Brook to make sure that in all our community centres we have up posters saying breastfeeding welcome here. But you're absolutely right, I will champion it as much as I can. I welcome working with you on that. I'm being reliably informed that it's always, Oxford Breastfeeding Centre always has been a charity. So that's well, it started. Chairman, I don't want to speak across the council. Chairman, I just want to make a point of personal explanation. I might just. It's a minor issue, I guess, really, but I just defer to an expert here.
Yes, thank you. My interest in this came from leading the Health Visitors Baby Friendly Initiative project, which gained full accreditation in August 2017. The Oxfordshire Breastfeeding Support Service is a great service. It was originally under the Baby Cafe umbrella, and Baby Cafes are a charity. They're part of the National Childbirth Trust. And they, the local initiative decided to go independently a couple of years ago, partly, as I understand it, because because they have to pay a licence to Baby Cafe, which is quite expensive. They do provide a great service across the city. I think that for women to feed successfully, we need a mosaic of services. The Oxford University Hospitals are working towards baby-friendly accreditation. As I've said, the Health Visitor Service has got full accreditation. If anybody wants me to start talking about that, I will go on for the rest of the meeting. And obviously voluntary support as well is really, really important. So thank you for raising that.
Okay. Ros, was there anything you wished to add to that? Craig?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. And I'm sure, Louise, you thought about this, but I also realise that local government isn't always as joined up as we like to think it should be, or is. But I'm wondering whether you brought to the attention of the Health Improvement Board the work of the No Local Connection Homelessness Review Group, because it's very, very extremely relevant to priority 10, which is prevention of homelessness. And in fact, I go as far to say that a lot of the recommendations, most of which were approved by CEB, could form the basis of taking forward that priority county-wide, especially since it relies on the need for service providers and other local authorities and health and Orange to work together. And so it would seem a very useful place to present that report.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. We did have someone from the homeless team presenting at the Health Improvement Board meeting on last Thursday, but that just hasn't made its way into this report yet, but you'll get an update next time. Thank you.
Councillor Azad?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to point out to this council that there were some services for Asian women and in particular women and men at the East Oxford Health Centre. They were advocates in each languages like Punjabi, Hindi, Bengali, and that service has been taken away a couple of years ago because of funding. And it's very important that people have advice in diabetes, blood pressure and other unhealthy diet. If those services can be brought to East Oxford Health Centre, please.
Councillor Upton?
I will look into it. Thank you. Talk to me later.
On that note, we will depart for tea and hopefully be back at 7. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please proceed. I think we will kick off with public addresses and questions next, which I might find the right page. Here's page 115 on the agenda. Sorry. Item 13 on the briefing note. There's one, Dr. Ruby Slater.
Thanks very much.
Up to 5 minutes.
Thanks everyone. As chair of the Oxford European Association, I'm delighted to commend to this council the Oxford European Charter, which the Oxford European Association adopted on the 23rd of October and then CON. The OEA is proud of Oxford's open, diverse and tolerant character. 1 in 10 Oxford residents was born elsewhere in the EU. And the OEA is determined for Oxford to remain an international, open and welcoming European city. And we call on all employers, institutions and authorities in Oxford to do all they can to respect, protect and fulfil the rights to which EU27 citizens are entitled and to ensure they're not discriminated against in any way. The OEA is vigorously campaigning for our rights as Europeans. It firmly believes that Oxford's EU27 residents should have their rights fully maintained if the UK leaves the European Union. This must include a lifelong guarantee that they can leave the UK and return thereto, and that as residents, the right to vote in all local government elections is maintained. Electoral eligibility signifies membership of the communities in which the citizens have made their home. It demonstrates that they remain equal in law and in fact. It enables them to continue to contribute to their local communities. EU27 citizens should be able to continue to fully participate in civic life. But the OEA also believes that irrespective of Brexit, the UK should be much more forthcoming to EU27 citizens who have made their homes here by extending their electoral participation rights so they are suitably enfranchised in national elections and in referendums, and by reducing the financial burden of naturalisation for those who wish to do so to the cost of administration from its current prohibitively expensive level. This is not only the right thing to do, but also the right time to do it, in response to the exclusionary and unwelcoming nature of much of the discourse in this country around immigration. Queue jumping, anyone? Indeed, we're heartened by the cross-party support for this motion, which reflects the appreciation of residents across Oxford for the contribution that migrants from the rest of Europe and around the world have made to our city. We sincerely hope other cities, Oxfordshire County Council, and ultimately Westminster will follow suit. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, you've given a written response. Is there anything you wish to add?
No.
Thank you. In that case, thank you very much. Thank you. We now have two. Mr. Arkwell on Farndon Court.
Yes, this is a really very important address I want to ask the Mayor, CEO, Mr. Mitchell, elected councillors, to really dig deep. I want you to support the women of Farndon Court. I'm sure you all know it was formerly Farndon Court, used to be the YWCA, the Young Women's Christians Association. It was bought in the 90s by Catalyst with a covenant, 10-year covenant. And now today, Catalyst has decided, for whatever reason, most probably profit, to sell that premises and deny the people of Oxford the only women's refuge the city has. It's dreadful, and I really appeal to the councillors here to do something about this, because we just can't sit back and allow this thing to happen to really Oxford's most vulnerable people. I asked the Oxford University, who are now the purchasers of this site, who speak a lot about gender equality. I said to them, the town, these people from the town, they are the most vulnerable. If your speech is about gender equality means anything, Oxford needs a place where vulnerable people can go at a time of need and get accommodation. That centre, I've known people in times of stress who have gone to Farndon Court and been offered accommodation commensurate with Oxford's living wage. In other words, it was affordable. No one asked these women, do they want it to close? No one asked them if they wanted it upgraded. It was done over their heads. And to my horror and shock, I haven't seen anyone really come up and defend them. Now, you know last year we lost Lucy Faithful, 50-room house. It went, when I worked as Oxford's food bank for 2 years, I saw the good work they did, giving the food to Oxford's homeless. And now, a year later, we're losing another prized accommodation, covenanted accommodation. For this reason, I beg you, I ask you, this accommodation, if it is to go, must be replaced. No one wants women living on the streets in Oxford. You all know it's not safe. So for this reason, I've asked in this council, I'm asking you, CEO Mitchell, to use the funds of this resource, one, to punish Catalyst, because they are our partners in Blackburn Leys, they've taken over Temple County pools, and for them to ignore a covenant like this and sell it is outrageous, it's wrong. And secondly, if it can't be replaced, then a new accommodation must be provided for the vulnerable. Most of these women are Caucasian, working class women in need. I call upon all of you even you who were whipped, I know a lot of you guys were whipped on your side of the house, to do something to let it be known clearly that this council is not happy that Catalyst has ignored a tradition of a covenanted building to sell it for profit. And secondly, if it has to go, I call upon you all here now to please do something to restore to the vulnerable women of Oxford a place of safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arthwell. I have been quite generous in not stopping you from speaking because you strayed away from the content of your written address. Councillor Smith, is there anything you wish to add to your written response?
Thank you. Yes, so I have provided a written response. I would like to just make it clear that Farndon Court isn't a refuge, and it's not the case that all the residents there are vulnerable. It's not affordable housing, it's not a hostel, it's not a refuge. It is market sort of rate housing where tenants are on a regular private rented sector, a short hold tenancy, and many of the residents there are PhD students, for example. Of course, it's it's very unfortunate, and it's I really feel for the situation that particularly long-term residents find themselves in. It's a horrible situation for anyone to be in, to lose your home in that way and be evicted. But I think it's as I've said in my written response, Catalyst are a valued partner of this council, and we have been working very closely with them. In particular, there are 12 residents which could be described as having vulnerabilities, and in particular, the City Council is working very closely with Catalyst to make sure that they receive extra help and are provided for. I would like to just maybe read out something that's come from Catalyst in one of the many communications that many councillors I know on the side of the chamber have been having with them in the last few months. And that's the decision to dispose of assets is not an easy one, but we remain committed to making good business decisions to achieve our core social purpose of providing housing in Oxford and the South East for those that need a home most. Money raised by this sale will be reinvested so we can continue to grow, expand and improve our housing stock and deliver more affordable homes at places such as Temple Cowan and Blackberries.
Thank you. We now move on to item 3, and Mr. Arthwell, can I encourage you to try and stick to the text of the
publicly elected councillors. How can the council taxpayers of Oxford be actually described as customers, as Councillor Chapman portfolio holder implies? Despite the City Council having privatised or outsourced the majority of its services and responsibilities, the council taxpayers of Oxford fund the City Council, including a considerable contribution to its executive staff's pensions. For this reason, I call upon Oxford City Council to address the council taxpayers as funders and cease describing those who fund the City Council as customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman, do you wish to add anything to your written statement?
I don't wish to get into a semantic discussion about customers and funders. But what I do want to do, and I've said this before, is to reiterate that to carry on saying that we privatise or outsource the majority of our services and responsibilities is absolute nonsense.
It's a lie.
Absolute nonsense. And we have to use every opportunity to put the record straight, and I'm putting the record straight now. That's not our policy. We've never believed in it. We've always kept our services, almost all our services in-house. We kept our 8,000 council houses when we could have sold them off. I mean, how many more examples do I have to give, right, about the fact we oppose privatisation and outsourcing? So, for the record, we do not outsource or privatise the majority, or 50%, or 30% of our services. We don't do it, and I wish people would stop saying it. Thank you.
Item 4, Mr. Stephen Patrick.
I'm here to ask for the acknowledgement for my actions that led to an estimated by me £1.5 million savings to the council in not having to reclad 3 out of 5 tower blocks in Oxford. In your briefing notes you will have sort of more details, but to make long story short, after the Grenfell Tower, on June 14th, Mr. Stephen Clark sent the residents assurances about fire safety of our homes. They were in stark discrepancy what I had in work schedules. I'm one of the leaseholders, so I have been quoted for £50,000 listing what materials are being used in those tower blocks. And my schedules of work explicitly stated non-fire resistant trespass vitravon composite cladding panels and also non-fire resistant Stotherm foam insulation panels. Okay, this is what I had black and white from the council. These specifications were common to all 5 blocks. Given my disappointment with the council, I have been here a few times, and pretty gross level of concern if you're leaving those tower blocks, I decided to write a letter to Prime Minister Theresa May on June 19, 2017. I asked for immediate intervention because the work was still ongoing, so there was no need to take any panels. Basically, that would just have a look. On June 26th, the Prime Minister replied, thanking me, and referred the case to the Department of Communities and Local Government. You probably know the story later on because on 22nd of August, there was an extraordinary council meeting where the council agreed to spend £1 million to reclad 2 tower blocks out of 5. I claim that because of my early action and dismissal of your statement that everything is hunky-dory, you had to reclad only 2 tower blocks, not all 5 of them. So by proportion, £1.5 million was saved to the council. Now, in my written speech, I asked for Councillor Rowley not to say anything, with reasons you will find with great detail on page 33 in your briefing notes. Instead, I asked Council Leader Councillor Brown to check the facts herself and say what measures the Council can take to acknowledge my alleged contribution. I believe this type of contribution should be awarded in some way. Now, at the bottom of page 33, you will find pretty much 2 sentences, and I will actually quote them. It would be entirely unwarranted and inappropriate to make a cash award to him. However, what follows that statement, maybe I didn't have any grounds, is absolutely and utterly unbelievable and shameless. I will quote again exactly. We will check the facts of the case. Hello? Like you will check, you have not checked, like the council has provided written response entirely denying Dr. Piechnik's claim, maybe crazy, before checking the facts. Outrageous. So, if the council had not checked the facts before denying in the whole entirety my claim, what is exactly being denied, I ask? There's a slight departure from the original claim, because are you denying abilities normally attributed to 3 white monkeys? No here.
You can
no
please
listen.
stick to your preferred statement, that would be appreciated.
But these are the 3 wise monkeys, look at them.
Can you not interrupt, please, from the public gallery? Thank you.
That's pretty good extension given what's written in the notes, so I believe I'm still in my right to address what has been an absolutely abysmal, shameful response to my query. And frankly speaking, well, for anybody willing, I can provide detailed copies of my correspondence, and right now I do not wish to hear any kind of response. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, would you like to respond beyond what you've already... Can you be quiet in the public gallery, please? Councillor Brown, would you like to say anything further in response to your written statement? Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, obviously my written statement has already been quoted so has been acknowledged by the person addressing us just now. So what I would say is I absolutely would reiterate that it would be entirely unwarranted and inappropriate to make cash payments. And in answer to the quoting of the second sentence there, I agree it doesn't actually sit terribly well in terms of that answer. And it is in fact the case, of course, that we have checked the facts of the case. I think it was really meant to reiterate that we would be happy to check them again because we are quite confident that that would support the position that we have already stated.
Thank you very much. Item 5, Mr. Hartwell.
Lord Mayor, Senior Mitchell, elected councillors. This council's plan for Oxford City Centre will result in bus stops being located far from the shopping area. Our society is ageing, with mobility difficulties affecting increasing numbers of all ages of people. Additionally, it is clear that Oxford City Centre would like Oxford City Centre to be free from people who earn a living by asking assistance from the general public. Those in need are still part of our society. It is widely believed and reported that a considerable percentage of those in need today used to hold responsible jobs in the merchant navies or in the military services. Finally, the current plan for electric vehicles only for Oxford City Centre by 2020 will not create any difficulties for the few who are able to purchase one of Elon Musk's Tesla vehicles. However, with the city centre abandoning its current plans, will the City Council abandon its current plans for an all-electric Oxford City Centre and instead concentrate on using the Council's vast resources to improve the entire life experience for families living on Oxford's living wage? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clarkson, would you like to add anything to your written statement?
No,
thank you very much. Item 6, addressed by Mr. Sharon Parnes, IHRA statement.
Thank you very much. Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak here again today. At your July meeting in this place, I attended as an Oxfordshire resident, an elected councillor, and a Jew, not necessarily in that order, to draw your attention to the fact that the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism had not yet been considered for adoption by this authority. I noted that 17 months earlier, in January 2017, the then Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government wrote to all council leaders, stating, quote, "Anti-Semitism must be understood for what it is, an attack on the identity of people who live, contribute, and are valued in our society. In light of this, I would like to take this opportunity to strongly encourage you to formally adopt the definition and consider its application in your own authority," end of quote. Having asked if your leader would undertake to put a motion for debate at the next council meeting, I concluded my remarks with a clarification specifically stating that by the IHRA definition, I meant the full definition including the published examples. And I also noted that the Chief Rabbi had said altering the guidelines would send a message of contempt to the Jewish community. I left this place feeling that the council was welcoming to me and commendably open, but I also left feeling somewhat confused. Subsequently, I also feel a little bit duped, and here's why. During the proceedings here, your leader took an admirably candid step of acknowledging the lapse of time in addressing the particular issue, and her subsequently published letter to the current Secretary of State sought to confirm, quote, "on behalf of Oxford City Council, that we support the IHRA definition as part of our commitment to tackle anti-Semitism and associated hate crimes in our city," end of quote. But it transpired Oxford City Council had been and remains apparently ambiguous as to whether it accepts the full IHRA examples of anti-Semitism. Initially, the Board of Deputies of British Jews published social media announcements applauding Oxford City Council for adopting, quote, "the full IHRA definition of anti-Semitism with all its appended examples, showing its commitment to tackling this ugly form of prejudice," end of quote. But shortly after, all these posts were deleted, and surely there must have been a reason. A short time later, perhaps by coincidence, on August 7th, the IHRA itself published a statement, a copy of which I've submitted for your consideration in advance of today's meeting. And I'm not sure if you received them because I didn't see them in the papers, but they're available. Okay, I understand you did receive them, so I retract that. So I'm glad you have. And that IHRA statement contained explanations by experts of the UK delegation to the IHRA on the working definition of anti-Semitism, explaining, among other relevant things, that, quote, any modified version of the IHRA definition that does not include all of its 11 examples is no longer the IHRA definition, end of quote. The IHRA statement explained, quote, if one organization or institution can amend the wording to suit its own needs, then logically anyone else could do the same. We would once again revert to a world where anti-Semitism goes unaddressed simply because different entities cannot agree on what it is, end of quote. So by the standards of the IHRA, which achieved international recognition on its definition of anti-Semitism, it isn't clear that Oxford City Council has actually adopted it. And just this month, we have seen continuation of anti-Semitism in this city, including a swastika prominently painted on a wall and a Nazi salute at a public event. And every time the IHRA definition is mentioned in this full council, including in July and again at your previous meeting, it is not only noted that the definition actually doesn't preclude the criticism of Israel, but members here go further in incorporating criticism of Israel to the discussion. It wouldn't be remiss for members of this council to acknowledge, at least for balance, that every now and then, even the Israeli government displays positive actions too. But really, criticisms or praise of Israel or any other country is not the issue, however much some seem determined to deflect the focus of attention of the IHRA definition. Leadership involves flexibility, but on hate crime and prejudice, there is no room for ambiguity. Oxford City Council, with respect, I suggest owes it to constituents and neighboring communities to confirm unequivocally whether or not it has adopted the full IHRA definition, including all of its 11 examples. And I ask for such confirmation today, whether it does so or not, yes or no, and it would be really helpful for avoidance of doubt if any response could possibly refer specifically to the examples that form the integral part of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, do you wish to add to your written response?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would just add to my response, which makes it very clear that we have never sought to distinguish between any of the definitions, and that we have adopted the full IHRA definition. And I'd also draw your attention to the second part of my statement, which makes it clear that we take very seriously the tackling of any racism in the city, whether it's anti-Semitism or anything else, and that we have very clear policies for responding very quickly to make sure that we do tackle things like racist graffiti, which you also referred to, and we make sure there's cleaned off within 24 hours of being reported, and we will continue to do so. Thank you for raising the issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 7, addressed by Chairman Hoffley. You may struggle, but you've got up to 5 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm here to talk about Oxford Anti-Racist City. Oxford United and Anti-Racist City is a community-based project set up as an educational platform and space where those being impacted the most by rising racism and bigotry are seen and heard. The project has been developed out of knowledge that minority communities in our city need to come together to discuss and develop strategies to counter all forms of racism and discrimination from day-to-day to structural rooted racism. My name is Jabunala Hartley. I came to Oxford in 1984 to join my mother, who was studying at Ruskin College. I have gone to school in Millenford School. I've used the Oxford College of Further Education. I've also used, I've done courses at Oxford Brookes University and some at Ruskin College. And I have also worked in Oxford as a postal worker, as a WEA tutor, and I've also worked in the NHS, the JR and Churchill. We wish to explore open dialogue about issues that affect the Oxford community. We want to explore issues like how are people impacted by racism around their communities? Are people aware of how they can be impacted? How does it affect people structurally? What are the areas of concern? We talked about education, the deconstruction and decolonization of the curriculum. We talked about employment, immigration, we talked about the police, and we talked about power. In our first workshop held in East Oxford on the 27th of October, we discussed themes as to how people are affected by racism. How can they begin to have a dialogue as a city? One person who was affected by a situation as a white person, she talked about how she was out with her black friend who was racially abused and she had to step in. A discussion followed about building meaningful solidarity with each other. Another incident we discussed in the room was by a community worker who saw treatment of two young people, one a black boy, one a white boy. The white boy was causing trouble and he was treated very differently by the police. According to the community worker, this incident that took place where this black boy who was disabled was tased by the police. When she inquired what will happen to the black boy, she was told that she would be informed by letter or email, but she has never been contacted. A discussion followed about accountability and power after that. One of the main things from the first workshop was around education and the curriculum, which does not cover Black history, which is British history, in a clear and coherent manner. We also talked about employment and discrimination. It was another strong theme. Talked about how people are affected. The NHS, for example, has few people from minority groups who are recruited into senior positions. This year has been especially difficult because we've seen a few incidents of racism. We had the march in the summer, which saw a huge protest against Trump. A couple of weeks ago, we saw Steve Bannon, who was Trump's advisor. We saw the protest. We also went to London to see the almost 40,000 people marched against fascism. I would like to express my concern that whilst there's so much going on in Oxford, we saw a swastika sign being signed, and some of the protests were disrupted by Tommy Robinson supporters coming to sign Nazi sign in the middle of the protest.
I'm afraid you're going to have to wind up there.
Okay. Basically, it's just to say to the council, we need solidarity from the council to rise up against this racist rhetoric that is affecting our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown, is there anything you'd like to add to your written response?
Thank you, David. Nice to see you. And thank you for raising these very important issues of this. I've said in my written response that obviously we're looking for particular support for particular projects. It's certainly very well worth discussing with your ward councillors, and I'm sure you will. But also to reiterate the points that I was making to the previous speaker as well, that this council absolutely takes extremely seriously the issues of racism in our city, and will challenge them wherever we find them, and we'll make sure that we are being as quick as we possibly can to tackle things like racist graffiti, but also that we will work with local communities wherever possible to make sure that we are making a case for integrated communities and also tackling racism in all its forms. So thank you very much for raising those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move on to questions. Number 8, question from Judith Harley as regards Temple County Library Fund.
Lord Mayor, councillors, at April's full council meeting, I addressed council outlining problems with car and cycle parking at Temple Cowley Library, caused by preparations for construction work on the former Temple Cowley Pool site. Cycle parking has been resolved, but nothing has changed regarding car parking. The verbal response I received from Councillor Brown in April was, I will ask officers to investigate and respond to you. By July's full council, I had received no response, so I again addressed council outlining the car parking problem. My verbal reply from Councillor Hollingsworth states, I apologise for the failure to respond to you. This was an oversight. Negotiations are underway between the City Council, Catalyst and the owner of an adjacent site to allow a site owned by the City Council to be used as temporary parking for the library. I have impressed on the officer leading this that this is a matter which now needs urgent resolution. It is now nearly the end of November, 7 months after my initial address and 4 months since my last address on this matter. The library still has no parking provision. What is your definition of the timescale of urgent resolution? I understand that the adjacent site referred to by Councillor Hollingsworth is in Cox's Yard, which contains a small landlocked area owned by the City Council. This area has no direct road access, except by arrangement with the site owner over his land. Despite Councillor Hollingsworth's impressing on the officer concerned that this matter now needs urgent resolution, this area is being used for contractor parking, not library parking. The contractors have provided themselves with ample parking on the adjoining school field and at the rear of the adjacent Silver Band Hall. The library has no parking provision, regardless of whose responsibility this provision is. At present, the library is undergoing roof repairs for roof damage which may have been exacerbated by the adjoining building work. The library is surrounded by scaffolding, which makes access to and parking on its slip road unsuitable. When will the negotiations between the City Council, Catalyst and the adjacent site owner be completed so that Temple Cowley Library can have some parking provision? Before completion of the Catalyst housing? This really isn't a difficult question. I've been asking since April and still have no specific date from you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a written response from Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Brown, is there anything you wish to add to that? Thank you. In that case, we move on to question number 9 from Nigel Gibson. Thank you.
So, in 3 previous council meetings, I brought to your attention the way in which you're discriminating against the disabled and others qualifying for a bonus card by increasing the admission charge at certain times of the week by 53.85% from £1.30 to £2. Telling me that the price increase is to encourage those on the bonus card to get their exercise at less busy times is clear and obvious discrimination. There is no similar charging regime for the general user. There are many reasons why a bonus card user may want to exercise at a particular time, and if they find the facilities too busy, they can surely choose for themselves without an enforced additional charge as an incentive. It was extremely disappointing at the last council meeting to have my question not answered, so I'm back to ask it again. As you may infer by my presence, This issue is not going away until you decide to resolve things by stopping your discriminatory practices and compensating bonus card users appropriately. So I'll ask the question again, because quite obviously it still hasn't been answered, but I'll adjust it a little bit. When are you going to tell me how many times people with bonus cards have been charged £2 after 8 p.m. during weekdays and after 4 p.m. at weekends since the prices were raised in April? I know we've had a short discussion beforehand. I'm quite happy to be engaging with Fusion to talk about their IT system, because I do have some experience in this, to investigate why they are incapable of doing anything about it.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, do you wish to add anything to the
Thank you,
witness
Mr. Gibson, for that offer, and let's talk afterwards and make that happen, because it's very welcome offer that I'm sure you'll want to make use of, so thank you. Since you last came to talk to us, Fusion have informed me that there are some technical anomalies with what they describe as a small number of membership cards. As Alderman Bob Price would urge us, we do need to rectify that anomaly as soon as possible. But in the meantime, anyone that thinks they've been overcharged, they should speak to the duty manager at the centre and get an immediate refund, or if the issue isn't resolved to their satisfaction at the centre, then they should contact the leisure performance manager at the City Council.
Thank you very much. We now move back to the main agenda. I'd like to move back to agenda item 15, Scrutiny Committee update report from Councillor Gant. Over to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to begin, if I may, by just thanking Councillor Henwood for his very considerable contribution to scrutiny. David was not only Vice Chair of our Scrutiny Panel, but was also Vice Chair of the Growth Board Scrutiny Panel, Chair of the Housing Panel, and a member of both the other standing panels, so I think it's fair to say that nobody could have contributed more, because there wasn't anything more to do. I look forward to welcoming Steve back to the main Scrutiny Panel and John to the Growth Board Scrutiny. Obviously, with David's resignation from the Labour Whip, there are various vacancies that need to be filled in various different ways, and those will be done through the party group system and at the Scrutiny Committee's next meeting, which is on the 5th of December. In terms of our work, you have a report in front of you. We certainly dealt with a lot of very worthwhile and weighty issues. I don't want to add too much to what the report says, but 22 of the 29 priority work plan items have been considered or scheduled for meetings this year. I'd very much like to welcome on behalf of the committee the completion of the No Local Connection review group, which was an extremely thorough and important piece of work, and the committee looks forward to the changes being implemented and reviewed in 12 months' time. Homelessness remains a key feature of the Housing Panel's work plan. Our ongoing attention to the performance of our leisure partner Fusion Lifestyle and the impact of the Westgate Centre, both matters of very real concern to the residents of our city, will be considered at our meeting next week. Budget review process starts soon after that, and then the second and last scrutiny review will be on tourism management beginning in February after the budget. I'd just like to finish by reminding members of the existence of the new Growth Board Scrutiny Panel, and very much urging members to engage with that process. It is absolutely about accessibility, accountability and public engagement with that process, and we had a good meeting, a good first business meeting last week. Finally, I'd like to thank all colleagues who've been involved with the process, everybody who's attended our meetings to speak, both board members, officers and members of the public, and I think in particular our splendid scrutiny officers, having begun to engage with scrutiny colleagues in other councils. I think it wouldn't be unfair to say that it's only reinforced my appreciation of just how good our officers are.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions on the Scrutiny Committee update report? Craig?
Yes, I think you meant scrutiny was on 4th of December, not 5th. But my question was really about Fusion Lifestyle. I mean, we were quite, as Scrutiny Committee, we were saying it needed an independent audit, and I know we're going to discuss it, but I'm wondering what progress on that audit has been.
My apologies, I did of course mean the 4th of December and not the 5th, and we will, yes, I will undertake to get an answer to that at the meeting next week.
Thank you. Any further questions? Otherwise, we will note that report and thank the committee for their work. We then move on to item 16 in the briefing note, motions on notice. There are 7 and we have up to 1 hour to complete these, or not as the case may be, followed by drinks in the parlour. A. Oxford European Charter. Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This motion is very closely based on the European Charter put together by the Oxford European Association, which I have the honour to be secretary. You've already heard from the chair, Ruby Ziegler, who made an address to council just now. I think it's a very important motion, and for the first time we're talking about Brexit, yawn, but we're talking about people. We're not talking about economic ties, we're not talking about trade deals, we're talking about the people of Oxford and how this is, how the Brexit negotiations are likely to affect many people who live in our city, people from Spain and Germany and France and Portugal and Poland and Romania and Lithuania and all over the place. Ireland, who are affected by the changes that are going on at the moment. And I'm very worried, as many of them are, about what their prospects are and what is likely to happen, whether we have a deal or whether we don't have a deal. The government is saying that they will have the right to live here, come what may. But May has already caused us quite a lot of problems. We've seen the hostile environment she created while at the Home Office for migrants in general. We know too that it was Theresa May who was in charge when we had the Windrush scandal. So it's one thing to say, oh, there will be no problem, to seeing the actuality. And the Oxford European Association is very worried, as I am, that in practice people will have to provide a large amount of information and pay a large amount of money simply to establish the right to remain as people who have made their homes perfectly legally and perfectly properly in our city. So I think we need to give them all the help we can, and I think we need to send a very strong message to government and to our MPs, and indeed, Lord Mayor, to other councils in Oxfordshire. It'd be very good if they too address this issue in the way that we are doing. The other matter of concern, I think, is what's going to happen to the votes of people from the EU27, people who at the moment are able to vote in local elections. The government is now saying that after 2019, that will disappear, and it could indeed affect people who are councillors in this council, who are not British nationals but are EU27 citizens, may no longer be able to represent the community. So I think it's really very worrying. Freedom of movement should hold no fears for people in Oxford. It's our very lifeblood, and personally I object very strongly to be imprisoned in these islands and not allowed the right to work, study or retire elsewhere in Europe.
Thank you, John.
I'm very pleased this is a cross-party motion, and I hope everyone in the chamber will give it their support. This is not about whether we vote.
John, that's it.
And I'm very grateful.
Good, right. We now have Councillor Garden seconding this. Would you like to speak now, or would you like to wait until later?
I'll speak now.
Okay.
So I agree with everything that John has said, and the only other bit that I would add is to remind everyone that the withdrawal agreement has been signed, but the declaration on the future is so vague that you could almost read any future into it that you choose. We are being asked to accept a Brexit we could support rather than one we know we will get. So I don't think anyone voted for this. In fact, actually everyone I speak to disagrees with what's going on at the moment. Oxford will not forgive us, and they will not forget if we make the city poorer, both in terms of human costs and economically. I therefore second the motion as a way to show support and acknowledge every single person that contributes to our city. And I urge everyone in Labour to please stop sitting on the fence. This should not be party political. This is for the betterment of our country. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councillor Donnelly and then Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd also like to speak in support of this motion and to specifically address the concern that was raised in the address to the Council and also in Councillor Tanner's address concerning the cost and difficulty in navigation of the naturalisation procedure. This morning, though my wife is a non-EU national, I was at her, despite the fact that she's been married to a British national for 5 years and has a child here and a job here, at her the latest in a series of indefinite leave to remain appointments. Council members may be aware that 2 months ago the visa and immigration system or service was subcontracted out by the Home Office to a private company called Sopra Steria, which some might say ironically is a French-based outsourcing company. This is one of a number of measures since the coalition government initiated the hostile environment in 2011, which has resulted in more than 5,700 changes to immigration, soaring costs of the process, soaring costs in the ability to access information around the process, and ultimately we now have a situation in which if you have the wealth to pay for a immigration solicitor to help you through the process, it can become quite painless. If you are extremely wealthy, you can pay for mobile teams to come to your own homes. However, for those who struggle, or even not struggling, it's becoming increasingly expensive and difficult to navigate. Since this most recent privatisation, people going through that process have to pay £2.50 a minute per advice on the helpline, £75 per page of translation, and many of these costs are hidden and have not been brought to the public attention. When I spoke to the officer who was processing my wife's papers this morning, she, who herself was EU 27 national, was explaining to me that since the slightly chaotic transfer to this new Sopra Steria mechanism 2 months ago, numbers of EU nationals going through the process has absolutely soared because of levels of anxiety and worry over what's going to happen in the future. Our EU citizens should not have to bear the cost of the Brexit sterling crash that the Tory government have engendered, and I think that any message we can send in support of those citizens is the right one to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Bang on time. Councillor Simmons and then Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank firstly the Oxford European Association for its campaigning work on behalf of the residents of Oxford. And over the years I've been involved in a number of motions to Council on our relationship to the EU, most recently gaining support for a people's vote on the terms of any deal. The deal has of course since been clarified, and I guess it's a small compensation that there's the withdrawal deal at least offers some protection during the transition period for EU nationals. I think in this council chamber we have a fair degree of agreement on what's best for the people and businesses in this city and what is best for the country. The residents of Oxford voted Remain, and we have, for the vast majority of us at least, consistently backed motions and statements which try to prevent Brexit and or mitigate its impact. I only wish the situation nationally was as clear as it is in this council chamber. I often think the country should be run by the people in this chamber, because we would come up with a far more elegant solution. And I refer to, of course, the Labour Party, but not just the Labour. Of course, the Tories the divides within the Tories are deeper than ever, of course, and the influential right-wing group has been forced to reveal their plans for the country. They very much want a hard Brexit to line their own pockets at the expense of our social and environmental protections, and they want, as anyone will know if they speak to me about this, they want a low-tax, low-spend, low-wage, low-regulation Brexit. And of course, if things go wrong, they have the money to buy citizenship anywhere they want. And this is a plan B that's not available to most of us. I don't think there's a realistic proposition, personally, of any other deal being reached other than that was agreed yesterday. Its deal is certainly not as bad as a hard Brexit. Neither is as good as remaining in the EU. And this motion understandably focuses on the rights of the EU citizens, and I have to say the best way to protect their rights is to remain within the EU.
Councillor Rowley, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Known. How does one follow that? I'm pretty confident that Susan would do a much better job than Theresa May. But do you really want me as Secretary of State for Housing? It's sometimes tempting to think that the motions section of the agenda is of marginal relevance, but that's not the case with this motion. We are fortunate in this city to welcome many people from the EU countries as students, as permanent residents, as workers, and as visitors. A few minutes ago, I happened to be looking in the drawer. It's nothing to do with that. You were speaking, John. And I saw hello from the Netherlands, ciao d'Italia, 3 times, and to the barricades sister, somebody has written. Well, I hope brothers are welcome as well as sisters at the barricades, because this motion is about people who are part of the Oxford community as much as any other part. This is about defending our own people. So I commend the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, then Councillor Bellis-Summers.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like many other people in this chamber, I have family members who are EU concerned citizens, and so for me, as it is for many others, it is a personal issue. But from the city point of view, I think it is important to emphasise, as so many have already today, the huge contribution to our city made not just by EU citizens, but by immigrants from many, many different countries. And it is something that we have always valued as a city, and will continue to do so. And indeed, I think we will be in a very difficult position as a city, potentially, post-Brexit, if we ever get to post-Brexit. And incidentally, just for the record, I'm quite glad I'm not negotiating Brexit, so whatever thoughts anyone else has on that. But we will potentially be in an extremely difficult position, because we have been incredibly reliant on this city, on people coming to our city from many countries across the world. So I think anything we can do today to strengthen the position of people from elsewhere, it is really important, and I would be very happy when we get to the resolution of this to write to the Prime Minister to that effect. As I'm fairly confident that we will all support this motion. But I think it is worth reflecting that at the start of this process, the government made it very clear that they were quite happy to play with people's lives in this negotiation. And I think we are still in a place at the end of this where potentially we have a crash out with a no deal. And we will still be in a position where we don't know what the consequences are for EU citizens in our country. So everything that we can do to encourage the government to make it as clear as possible to people what their rights will be, I think is entirely to be welcomed. So I thoroughly support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Billy Summers.
I welcome this motion that is here as a new national, and I think it's a very good motion. I commend it. I went through a lot of hoop to get my citizenship this year, as well as spent a lot of money. I'm well aware this is going to be even more difficult for people after Brexit, and I find this is very deplorable. I can only say that I've been very welcome in the city of Oxford.
Thank you. Councillor Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. So we've heard this evening about the treatment of EU nationals, which is disgraceful. This treatment has been dished out to Commonwealth citizens and those who've lived in this country for many decades, for a very long time. So what we're seeing is a repeat of this type of treatment of the EU nationals, which needs to stop. The public speakers who came into the chamber earlier spoke about racism. And I think it's very important for us to connect the dots between the rise in xenophobia in the last 2 years in our country and the fact that there's a lot of anxiety that people are feeling. On Sunday, I was in my ward in Rose Hill, where a woman from Europe has been living for the last 15 years, and she spoke very clearly to me about the impact the past 2 years has had on her and her family, including her being subjected to racism and her children as well. So this is happening in our city, and I think it's very important that we take this opportunity as we're discussing this motion to just remind ourselves that there are people in our city who feel a lot of anxiety, EU nationals, about their futures. And this is why we need very strong leadership from everyone inside this chamber to ensure that the forces that seek to divide us and create division in our city are not allowed to do what they wish to do. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in this debate? Otherwise, we'll move to the proposer, Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Some excellent points made around the chamber. I particularly like the idea of Oxford City Council running the country. I'm sure we'll make a much better job of it than the current lot. This is about defending our own people. There have been all kinds of immigration controls over the years, but the Windrush affair was quite appalling. These people were British citizens with the absolute right to live here, but they had to prove it. And that's what worries me the most. That European citizens with the absolute right to be here will have to prove it, whether we get a deal or whether we don't get a deal. And as the leader has said, this is playing with people's lives and Oxford people's lives, and that, I think, is deplorable. I'm pleased that Councillor Billy Summers feels welcome here. I'm not so certain what will happen with my colleague, Tiago Queiroz. She's not able to be here tonight, but who's a Portuguese national and may be banned from representing people in Netherlands. That's a public disgrace. And Councillor Aziz is quite right, Lord Mayor. This is all tied up with racism. If you treat people like this, then no wonder racism is high. And if any of us is treated like this, whether we're born in Britain or born in the subcontinent or born on the continent of Europe, we are all at risk. I urge you to support this resolution.
Thank you. Can I see all those in favour of this motion, please show. I think that appears to be unanimous. Those against? No, I don't think there is. Okay, lovely. We move on to second motion on homelessness. Linda.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased to be proposing this motion, which sets out the ambition held by this administration that no one should have to sleep rough on the streets of this city, and resolves to continue this council's direction of travel towards that goal. We hold this ambition even though the actions of the Conservative government are making it increasingly difficult. Rough sleeping in this country has rocketed since 2010, and many local authorities, including Oxfordshire County Council, have cut homelessness services in response to the withdrawal of central government funding. Mental health and rehab services have been starved of resources, and the government has ploughed ahead with cruel changes to the benefits system such as the abolition of housing benefit for young people, the bedroom tax, and here in Oxford a local housing allowance, which is not enough to cover rents in the city. All these factors have contributed to more people ending up on our streets, and they also make it increasingly difficult for us to help former rough sleepers move on out of temporary accommodation and on with their lives in a permanent home. So despite this, we are working towards no one having to sleep rough in Oxford, and we are making progress. This winter, we are providing an extra 41 bed spaces in the city throughout the winter. And this is in addition to the 167 beds, which the council funds year-round in our adult homeless pathway. We will also be operating SWEP to open up as many beds as are needed for everyone to come in and out of the cold during periods of extreme weather. We are working on being able to build on this for next winter by focusing on the provision of a simple night shelter where more rough sleepers can find a safe place to stay while they are being assessed and directed towards longer-term solutions. This, together with a new way of organising SWEP, so it is no longer reliant on the same people who run core homelessness services for us, working overtime or volunteering their time, will, I hope, mean that we'll be able to offer a bed to everyone who wants one on every night when the temperatures drop below 0 degrees. And it will help us get closer to that ambition of no one having to sleep rough at all in Oxford. Thank you.
Councillor Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. So as Councillor Linda Smith stated, it's the government's political ideology in the form of callous and cruel austerity that is the main reason behind why in the past 10 years homelessness has peaked by 169%. And in less than half that time, the number of people experiencing homelessness in Oxford has increased by more than 400%. I welcome this motion on SWEP provision and the Council's vision of nobody having to sleep rough on the streets of Oxford. Ultimately, this is what we need to be working towards. And I welcome the work of the Council officers, partner organisations, voluntary professional workers and faith-based organisations, and indeed members of Oxford's communities who have been working together to alleviate the suffering of those being impacted by the humanitarian crisis that is rough sleeping in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak to this motion? Yeah, Martin, I saw first, and then Councillor Ross-Smith.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to commend this motion and to thank Councillor Smith and Councillor Aziz for their passionate speeches in favour of it. And also just to say, to maybe highlight this as an important moment, there was a huge feeling and sort of general will in Oxford that the severe weather emergency protocol should be reduced from 3 nights down to 1 night. There's a huge movement behind that. And now in this motion we have a real commitment that this is something that we're going to work towards. And I think it's something that we'd all like to see. And it's also a response to Councillor Harris's great question earlier about exactly that. Also something that the motion does provide is it enshrines that officers should use their discretion where possible to open night shelters this winter. And in addition, I'd say that the opportunity in January and April to get reports on when SWEP has been invoked and how many times it's been invoked less than 3 nights and all that sort of thing means we as a council can see how that's actually been put into place. I think it's a really huge step forward, and I'd really like to thank Councillor Smith and Councillor Aziz for all the work that's gone into this.
Thank you. Councillor Ross-Smith.
Thank you. I'd like to speak in support of this motion, but there are some things in it that sort of concern me. My colleague, Councillor Garden, and I went out last Tuesday morning at 6 in the morning with the outreach group from St Mungo's. This is the group who actually go out and speak to those who are sleeping rough to make sure they're okay, to remind them if they've got an appointment for a basic assessment, and also to tell them what facilities are available for them. It was amazing. We were with them about 4 or 5 hours, I think, actually. But one thing that really did sort of hit me in particular was how cold it was. This temperature of below zero, for the sweep protocol to come into being, I really feel is too low, because it doesn't take into account the wind chill factor. It was quite windy on that Tuesday morning, and although the temperature was reading something, well above 5, it felt a lot colder because of that wind chill factor. So, nationally, I'd like to see that figure personally changed as such. It was very interesting afterwards when we got back with the debriefing things and the briefing for the day, listening to how they organise themselves, going to listen to probation, people coming out of prison and things, to stop them from becoming sleeping on the streets of Oxford and things, and also how much there are continuous drug sleepers in Oxford who have a drug or alcohol problem dependency, some of which are actually begging on the streets as well. And also the fact that the city is a draw for a lot of people in Oxfordshire, but as I understand it, the shires don't actually fund, so Charwell, West, Vale and South don't actually fund anything for the city centre, where some of their rough sleepers have come from. And I think that needs to be addressed. I do hope that might be taken up with council leaders around Oxfordshire, that perhaps they'd like to contribute to the council's funding of some of these places. The other thing that came out quite strongly was how much support is needed. It's not so much the place for someone to sleep overnight, it's actually how much more support workers, outreach workers are needed as such. So I will be supporting this motion, but I do hope that the reviews that happen in January and so forth are worked upon, and that we actually look to help more people, with perhaps more workers doing outreach work. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A couple of points really directly picking up from some issues that Councillor Ross Smith was mentioning there. But firstly, I think it's just worth reminding people that we are in this terrible situation because, as has been said by previous speakers, because of the government's austerity programme. In 2010, we were in a position in the city where we had almost no drug sleepers. We had pretty much solved the problem. And it is just shocking, depressing, beyond all measure that we are now in the position we are in, where we visibly see people sleeping rough on our streets, and we know we have an even bigger homelessness problem than that. We know we have hidden homelessness and so on, and we have people living in overcrowded accommodation, and that, of course, is the other side of homelessness, which is less visible for us all. In terms of the issues around other districts, Councillor Smith is quite correct in saying that it is not always the case that other districts in Oxfordshire are doing as much as they could in order to help tackle this issue. It is something that I regularly raise with other council leaders in Oxfordshire. We'll continue to do so, and we are having a serious discussion about it sometime quite soon. We have, as a result of representations I previously made to, for instance, the Leader and Child District Council, seen additional funding being put in to provision in the city. It isn't the case that the other districts don't fund any provision at all in the city. They do fund some, particularly Charwell, and they have funded some more. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't a great deal more they could do in both their own areas, but also in the city. As I'm sure councillors are aware, on the last count, a number of those people, there were more people from outside the city, who had local connections to outside the city, to specific districts outside the city by a long chalk, than there were people who had connections to Oxford City. So we know that the city is a draw, partly because of its services and for all sorts of other reasons as well. We accept that, and we make sure that we have the services there for those that need them. But we cannot do this alone. It is not possible for the city council to fund everything. So I think I would commend this motion to Council, because I think this is really a fantastic step to getting an improved situation in the devastating situation that we find ourselves in terms of government policy.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In supporting this motion, perhaps I could also make a few points and ask a few questions. I mean, certainly this motion is welcome in that it restates our commitment towards zero rough sleeping, and that's certainly something we should keep pushing and keep reminding ourselves that that's our ultimate goal. And there is, as people have said, a humanitarian crisis on our streets, and underlying that is the government's austerity measures. The national situation is very bad. The situation in Oxford is even worse. As has been said, we have proportionally greater increase in rough sleeping on our streets than other cities. What I would say is, until recently, I mean, what the No Local Connection Homelessness Review Group identified is we weren't doing everything we could do, and we weren't doing everything even other authorities were doing. We were not following best practice as outlined by Shelter and other homeless organisations, and as a result there was 25 recommendations that went to CEB, 19 of them were accepted. So I think if those are implemented, we will have a better situation. For example, residency requirements is one of the key ones that struck me, that just changing our view on residency will in fact mean far more people come off the streets because they'll be accepted into our homeless pathway. So yes, this is great. I would ask about point 2, about working with partners towards a SWEP protocol that basically is more generous in terms of opening up whenever temperatures are forecast to fall below zero rather than for 3 nights in a row. I'm wondering when that's going to come in, because as point 3 says, by next winter, 2019-20, we should be doing away with SWEP and having a model of continuous winter provision, which is of course the right way to go. It's a shame that's not in this winter, but accepting that, when is this change to the SWEP protocol going to happen? Because if it doesn't happen for this winter, then there's pointless, because next winter we'll have continuous provision. And I very much agree that we should be monitoring this because we need to constantly improve our SWEP provision. And my other point is SWEP last winter, it wasn't just about capacity, it was about location as well. So there are actually some SWEP accommodation which was open and underutilised, and others which seem to be overutilised, or at least people turning up who are redirected to other locations. So I'm just wondering about this provision, that hopefully we will look at where the provision is, as well as the amount of provision, because that's important for people to transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'll be supporting this motion. Homelessness is obviously a problem, and we heard the reason and everything. But I expect, and I'm sure my council will do, I also expect my council to do whatever they can to tackle, and winter is upon us. I was wondering if we can write to the community centre association, the different community centres, because most of the people, when I drive my taxi around, they have some kind of bedding, they're lying in a cold street, but just providing a warm room can help them overnight somewhere. And also, it's not because they should write to us, then you've got a religious institute. I'm sure the churches do their job. You have a synagogue, you have a gurdwara, you have a number of mosques. You can write to those people if they can. Not everybody have an alcohol issue and the other thing. There are people with severe different issues, mental health issues and the other thing. Not everybody is a homeless person is alcoholic issue. So whatever their religious requirements are subject to that, if anybody can provide any warm room just for the overnight with a nice hot cup of tea or something. I mean, people of Oxford are very kind. Whenever you see any charity event, no matter which colour creed they are, they give anonymously. So you can work with the communities. It's us who need to approach that. Like Councillor Simon just said, the recommendation is gone, but those things take time to go into the places. Winter is upon us now, and I'm sure we can do what we can. And I would like you to, in your response, to write to those people if they can help, because just warm room can help. Thank you.
I'm afraid, Councillor Aziz, you've already spoken, so cannot speak again. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to say poverty and homelessness have continued to increase. And being a member of the Scrutiny Committee, I'd like to also bring to light that the current programme and the system that's currently in place needs to be re-looked at. And I think that it's really important to carry on supporting the poor and the needy. And I feel that as Oxford's champion, we all as leaders have our duty as a government to carry on providing these services that they so badly need. And I really welcome the hard work that the councillors, and I recommend this motion 100%. So thank you very much to you, but also very thank you to all the organisations who have supported this motion.
Thank
Making
you.
this happen.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this motion? Otherwise, we will move back to Councillor Linda Smith to sum up before we take the vote. Linda.
So picking up on issues that were raised, Councillor Malick, what you've described is exactly sort of what SWEP does during those periods of very, very extended cold weather, and also what Oxford Winter Night Shelter does brilliantly. And this year they're doubling the number of beds that they provide in church halls to 20 beds during January, February and March, and we're really grateful for the massive contribution that makes to our effort in the city and all the volunteer hours that are put into making that happen. I would love to see other organisations, either faith-based or perhaps educational establishments, raise their game and make a similar contribution. And I think the city conversation is possibly an important forum for having those conversations and exploring that. But that's something that I would love to see happen and we're very keen to support. On Craig's point about the SWEP protocol, so the SWEP protocol is in place for this winter, it won't be changing. What we have said, if you look at the motion, we are asking for our officers to use their discretion on when SWEP is triggered. Because at the moment we make a commitment for it to be triggered when it's 0 degrees for at least 3 nights, or -5 degrees for 1 night. But there is officer discretion, and things like wind chill and snow on the ground should be taken into account. So what we have said is whenever resources allow, and that is the issue given the model that we're operating with, whenever resources allow, we would like it to be triggered when it's freezing. The other point you raised about people going to the wrong place, this is really important. So last year there was a lot of miscommunication, a lot of people thinking that they were helping, meaning well, going out, talking to rough sleepers and giving them inaccurate information by sending people directly to some of the SWEP venues. So we are making an extra effort this year to make sure everybody knows exactly how it works. So when SWEP is triggered, people need to go to one central point, and that's O'Hanlon House, between 9 and 9:30, and then they will be allocated somewhere to go to. And transport is available, if they have mobility problems especially, but they will be given assistance to get there. And that is so clients can be spread out between the venues, so you don't have the situation of everyone going to one venue and it being full, so people don't have to traipse across the city. Councillor asked me if I don't want to see anyone sleeping out, whatever the temperature, and certainly, running a service based on temperatures going up and down by a few degrees, opening and closing hostel beds isn't an efficient way to run a service, and it's not the best way to help people either. So that's why our priority is really got to be continuous provision throughout the winter. That's why we've got these 41 extra beds this winter, and that's why we'll be looking at what we can provide in terms of more night shelter provision next winter too.
Thank you very much. We will now move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour of the motion? Please show. I think That appears to be unanimous. Lovely, thank you very much. We now move on to number 3 on vehicle emissions. Proposer Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This really ought not to be a part of the political issue. It ought to be a matter of looking at the facts and deciding on the most rational, cost-effective way of tackling air pollution. As some members know, I've indicated in the past that I don't believe the 2020 zero emission zone is in any way the way forward, but what this motion is about is what I say is the way forward. We've known for some years now that diesel particulates cause cancer. Under the Council's existing plans, there will be no significant reduction in diesel particulates before about 2025, when the second stage of the proposed zero emission zone comes in. That's unacceptable. That's 7 years of no action. Action can be taken very quickly by the measures in this motion, by strengthening the low emission zone that already exists for buses, that is not limited to the city centre but covers all the arterial roads into Oxford, so that the buses have Euro 6 instead of Euro 5 engines, and by extending that zone to lorries. London already has a low emission zone for heavy goods vehicles, so it can be done. London's is a congestion charge, but there's no reason why the same technology shouldn't be used to make it an exclusion zone with serious fines for breaching it, and also extending it to tourist coaches. Those are the all diesel vehicles and its diesel particulates that are not being tackled at the moment. This is an urgent matter, and it should not wait until the middle of the next decade. We should take action now, which we can do very fast. I have, my initiative, spoken to the bus company, and they tell me that this is something that they could do without public subsidy, were it not for the uncertainty caused by the zero emission zone. They still have 34 buses that only comply with Euro 5. They could rapidly replace them all with Euro 6. So that's why I urge the Council to adopt this motion in its present form as tabled. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Do you have a second of this motion? Are you formally doing it now, or would you like to reserve your right to speak later?
I'll go now.
Lovely.
I think the Liberal Democrats welcome the ambition to turn the Oxford city centre into a zero emission by 2035. However, 2035 is a long way off, and as has been, we really need action now, and we can do something about it. I think it's the single-minded pursuit of the ZEZ is basically in danger of making the best the enemy of the good. And the good means reducing levels rather than eliminating them entirely. The city should be focused on immediate action to reduce pollution over the whole city as accelerated, and much of this could be done fairly quickly. The adoption of the Euro 6 standard is a fairly easy matter, is a comparatively easy matter to do, and could be rolled out fairly quickly, and would deliver immediate health benefits to our citizens.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, I'm picking up the vibe that you're not willing to accept the tabled amendment from Councillor Hayes. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, I'm not.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes, your amendment, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to start by thanking Councillor Harris for giving his thoughts about what we ought to be doing to tackle air pollution. In moving the amendment, I want to run on 3 parts of this amendment. The first is to make a point that isn't quite in the original motion, which is that the zero emission zone that was proposed isn't something which fell out of the sky. It's something which is part of a longer term programme of work that this City Council has been doing in close partnership with the County Council and other stakeholders. And it builds on quite considerable success that we've had as doing that partnership work. And so I understand the plea by the Lib Dem bench for urgent action, immediate action. I would make the point that we have been taking action for some considerable length of time, and we've seen some success. In fact, last year we saw a fall in harmful nitrogen dioxide levels of 22.7%, the largest year-on-year drop. The other point that I would make here is that we are engaged in a process with the County Council as well as other stakeholders in finalising the final stage of what the journey to zero will look like. That is a long-standing process. That process is underway. It's been reflecting on a significant amount of consultation, extensive stakeholder engagement, talking to those organisations, agencies and people most directly affected. And as a result of that, we'll be coming forward in the new year with our final proposals. And I think it's important to make it very clear that we wait until the new year in order to come up with those proposals, because that amount of work is complex. It's involved significant engagement. It's involved the sorting through some really significant challenges. And I think it's worth pointing those out in particular because we are introducing the world's first. And one of the things about the world's first is that nobody's done it before. We inevitably have to think through some real practical consequences. And the third point that I want to make is to put front and centre in the amended motion why we're doing this. We aren't doing this because we're single-minded or we love world firsts. We're doing it because we've got an unrelenting focus on tackling the human health harms of air pollution. That's why over the last decade we've concentrated so much effort working in such tight partnership to do that. It's why we're having such active discussions with the county now, not merely to tackle to bring on the zero emission zone, but actually to tackle the wider issues of transportation. We're a medieval city with congested streets, and Councillor Hollingsworth and I have been engaging with the County Council at a political and an officer level to make sure that we're making sure that we're getting as many vehicles off the road as possible, and what vehicles do remain on our roads are as non-polluting as possible. So I want to close by hoping that you will in fact accept the amended motion. I hope that you'll also engage in that process of scrutiny in the new year. I hope that you'll come to the members' briefings we're organising and continue to engage stakeholders as you have, although I would make the point that I think you're having a somewhat different conversation with bus companies than I'm having. And I would also hope that in talking through what the zero emission zone ought to be in the future, you do as we're doing as a council, which is to reach out to other local authorities. In the last few weeks I've spoken with the leaders of the environment cabinet members of Birmingham, of Southampton, of Leeds, of Brighton and Hove, of Liverpool, and also with the Mayor of London's office. They're all facing the same technological challenges that we are, so we're trying to bring in some ambitious change in the teeth of the government won't give us money and funding, money and powers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayes, do we have a seconder for your motion? Sian, would you like to speak now or later?
No, I'm quite happy to hold my peace.
Thank you. Right, we now need to debate the amendment. John Tanner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As members know, this used to be part of my portfolio when I was a member of the cabinet here. And I very much regret the way in which Councillor Harris is coming at this, because it seems to me he misses the point. And I think the amendment by Councillor Hayes is absolutely spot on. The zero emission zone is the only game in town, and it is not just a world first. It is much, much better than most cities are planning, because in London included, they're planning to charge people to be allowed to produce pollution, particulates and nitrogen dioxide. What people in Oxford are saying on the City Council and on the County Council, which is absolutely crucial because they're of course the Highways Authority, is to simply say no, you can't come in. And the way to deal with it is wrong to say that the only thing that's happening, say it's the only game in town, the only thing that's happening is the zero emission zone. It's happening alongside a lot of other moves. And one of the things that the County Council is very keen on, and I think they happen to be right, is that the way to deal particularly with particulates, which has got something to do with engines, but it also has a lot to do with the contact of wheels on roads and bits of tyre and all the rest of it coming off. The way to deal with particulates is to reduce the amount of traffic in the city centre. And that's why the County Council is looking very hard at workplace parking levies and about charging people to come into the city at all, because we want to shift the move to public transport and the bicycles a lot more. If it was simple, Councillor Harris, lots of people would have done it before. It's not difficult, it's not that simple, it's very difficult. And what I always try to do, and I see that Councillor Hayes is following in this, is to look at the science and see what actually works, to test it, to try it and see what we do next. But to pretend that there is a simple solution, I'm afraid, puts the Liberal Democrats in a very poor light.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Craig? Yes?
I do sympathise with the frustrations of the Liberal Democrat group, because obviously a zero emission zone starting in 2020, and albeit on a small part of the city, and we're now talking about 2019 until we're able to discuss it. I can understand why there's that sense of urgency that we must be doing something soon and now. But I also take on board what Councillor Hayes has said, is that he's involved in sort of complex Brexit-like negotiations with multiple parties and has to sort of hold his cards close to his chest and doesn't want anything to upset those negotiations. So I just would ask him a sort of straight question, which hopefully will go on record, as saying, are these things being considered, the Euro 6 compliant engines and new stricter emission standards for heavy goods vehicles and coaches as well as buses? And if he says yes, and they're all part of those negotiations, then I will be happy to support his amendment. Otherwise, I will be backing the Lib Dems.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, I just wanted to thank both John Tanner and Tom Hayes for all the work they're doing in this area. I think that it is really exciting, actually, what we're potentially doing in the City Council. And incredibly important, and I think that it is very interesting that lots of people are actually looking to Oxford as a leader in this particular area, as in fact this council has been for many years, in partnership with the County Council as the Transport Authority, in leading the way on all sorts of innovative transport measures. And we talked a little bit about some of the work that Councillor Jill Sanders did many years ago in her role on the Oxford Transport Strategy and Oxford and Highways and Traffic, the Oxford Highways and Traffic Committee. So there is a tradition, I think, in this chamber of working with the county to try and deliver measures which improve public transport and improve air quality in our city. I think it is important that we allow Councillor Hayes to get on with the negotiations and work closely with our partners. And it is a tricky process. The technology is not always entirely clear. Everything we can do to help our various different partners to deliver on this, we will be doing. But I think it is really important work, and I very much support Councillor Hayes' amendment.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this? Councillor Ross Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes. I've been listening very carefully to what's being said, and I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest with you. I think it is important that this is considered seriously. I was quite surprised to see the amendment as a whole actually as taken, because it almost negates Councillor Harris's motion, and I was quite surprised that it was allowed. There's some very careful wording in there, Councillor Hayes, I guess. What worries me is that we have areas within the city which have very, very high areas of poor air quality. I'm thinking of St Clements, I'm thinking of St Aldate's. St Aldate's, where we see, I think, probably the highest number of buses stopping and starting there. So Councillor Harris's motion really looks to attack that. I mean, the ZEZ is great where it's proposed, but in fact actually it's not the area of highest air pollution. And I really do feel that Councillor Harris's motion actually attacks that, actually addresses where we have the highest level of air pollution from the buses that we have and vehicles we have in St Aldate's and St Clements. So I really would urge Council to think very seriously about supporting Councillor Harris's motion. I believe he's got some more details, in fact, to give of the conversations that he's had with the bus companies. So I'll be looking forward to hearing those too. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. As you mentioned, queried the permissibility of the amendment. Anita, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've been considering the amendment in terms of this. It's likely to negate the motion in terms of the fact that it referred to considering all options and I was quite clear to the client. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this? In which case, Councillor Harris, you have an opportunity to respond to the amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I oppose the amendment for two main reasons. First of all, it is actually crossing out the things I proposed, the extended low emission zone, so any words about, well, we'll also consider it, don't carry much weight when the amendment actually crosses those lines out. Secondly, Councillor Hayes says that he has different conversations than me with the Oxford Plus Company. I'd like to quote from an email that was sent to me on the 2nd of November by Mr. Luke Marion, the Commercial and Financial Director of the bus company. I agree wholeheartedly with your view that we should be looking to introduce more Euro 6 compliant buses now, as these will deliver significant air quality benefit and can be funded commercially by operators without any subsidies or external funding required. As you know, we still have a large number of Euro 5 vehicles which require replacement over the period 2020 to 2022, some 34 vehicles in total, where it would not be economic or in some cases possible to upgrade the exhaust systems on these to Euro 6 with the funding that the City Council won from the Department for Transport. At present, due to the uncertainty surrounding the ZEZ, we cannot make any plans to replace these vehicles. So, Mr. Marion's advice is that the 2020 ZEZ is actually preventing the company proceeding with a measure that will quickly and simply, despite what Councillor Tanner said, bring about a significant reduction in air pollution. And thirdly, I say that really, with all due respect, it is hypocritical to say that you're working for the health of the people of Oxford if you won't agree to do this and insist simply on your plan that means nothing happens significant till 2025. Your own Ricardo report said little significant benefit in 2020. So that's why I asked the Council to reject the amendment.
Right, we have up to 3 minutes left to complete this motion. I propose that we extend standing orders in order to complete this motion. We next have Sean. Okay. Then we have the proposer to sum up. Tom.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I can't quite remember in the debate who actually said that this negotiation feels like Brexit negotiations, but was it Craig? It was witty and it was very succinct, so I thought it was probably Craig. It doesn't quite feel like it was like it doesn't quite feel like Brexit negotiations, but I take your sympathetic view that negotiating with bus companies, with taxi trade, with private vehicle representatives, with disabled users representatives, with the county council, which itself has within it its own views of what that ought to look like back in terms of zero emission zone, and also negotiating with the county council about how you situate the zero emission zone as an overall concept and one that's practical within the wider transport approach that they're trying to take around bus gates and workplace levy and demand management, and the whole list goes on, has been challenging. And that's why this process has taken slightly longer. But I think that's actually to the benefit of the overall zero emission zone plans that we'll be seeing in the new year. Like I said, it's a world's first for a reason, and that means that we have to get our heads around the technological shift. We have to think about the capital investments that need to go into our public transport provision. We need to think through how we source that money and how we do that in the context, frankly, of a government which has been taken to court 3 different times for not caring enough about air pollution. And I know that Susan won't mind me saying this, but I think one of the highlights of the year so far has been sitting in a room with Michael Gove, making very direct pleas to the Environment Secretary to consider the representation of Oxford in terms of pushing more money towards public transport providers, but also, frankly, giving more money and powers to local authorities. We work closely with Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth, UK 100, a whole plethora of councils around the country to make sure that we can join up and have a stronger voice together in order that we can have government really listen to us and give us the powers and funding that we need. But we all know here that the only way in which we'll actually see true environmental change at a local and national level is by having a change of government. The final point that I want to make is that I do hope people will support this amended motion. I do hope that people, as I said, will engage in a thorough process of scrutiny, and I hope that people will come to the all-member briefing that will take place in the new year. I hope members will recognise that in the various policies that this council has proposed in this portfolio that I hold, we've opened the door to transparency and scrutiny. As we saw just a few weeks ago, the public space of Judge Task Force in the members' briefing, which led to members coming in, making really good points, us taking those points away, reflecting on them and incorporating them slightly into the work that we're doing. So I hope you'll accept the amended motion. I hope you'll engage with the process in the new year. And Councillor Harris, you're obviously having lots of really interesting conversations. I hope you continue to do those, and I hope you continue to surface those with the full permission of the email sender.
Thank you. We now need to vote on the amendment. Can I see all those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against? And abstentions? Thank you. We now move to debate the motion as amended. I hope we won't have too many speakers on this. Can I see those who would like to speak on the amended proposal? In which case we will move to summing up by the proposer on the amended motion, Councillor Harris.
The amended motion does not serve the function of the motion that I tabled. It's a motion to endorse the 2020 zero emission zone, which serves no purpose, is going to drive a number of businesses into bankruptcy, is going to increase emissions in St Aldate's, which is highly polluted, because the only street of the 6 in the current zone, maybe not everyone knows, they're Cornmarket, Queen Street, Newen Hall, St Michael's, Ship Street, Market Street, the only one with significant nitrogen dioxide pollution, particulates not measured in any of these 6 streets, so we don't know, but probably also the only one with significant particulates is Queen Street. That is the buses. The council wants the buses to move to St Aldate's. Queen Street has 28 micrograms per cubic metre. St Aldate's has 40 already. 40 is the legal limit. It is going to push the emissions in St Aldate's above that limit. Councillor Hayes was not correct when he said in an answer to a question of mine at the last meeting, well, these are different things, they'll go in parallel. The extract I read from the bus company makes it quite clear they won't go in parallel. The bus company won't be investing in the low emission Euro 6 engines if the ZEZ goes ahead, so it is disastrous. It is not a good idea to do this just to try and be a world first guinea pig. It is a bad idea, so I call on Council to reject this amended, Bowdlerised version of my motion.
Thank you. We now move to a vote. Can I see all those in favour of the amended motion, please show. Thank you. Those against? And abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much. You're welcome to join us in the parlour. Thank you.